Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Brandon and I will be presenting on the Fall of Constantinople. In our first slide, we will discuss the context behind the fall of Constantinople. The fall of Constantinople was a major historic event. It all began at the siege of Constantinople on April 6, 1453. There were many previous attempts to conquer Constantinople by previous sultans, which were Mehmed II's ancestors. However, none were completely able until Mehmed II. Mehmed II, at the mere age of 21, led his army and the Ottoman Empire in its capture of Constantinople. Previously, the city had been so difficult to conquer due to its strong and high walls surrounding the city. However, with the new technology of cannons and gunpowder, the walls were stricken down, allowing for the Ottoman Empire to take the crowning jewel of the Byzantine Empire. With the new technology of cannons and gunpowder, walls to protect the city were no longer viable, as proven by the fall of Constantinople. There are many accounts of the details of the siege, including the account of Niccolo Barbaro. As described by Niccolo Barbaro, Mehmed II brought 160,000 men to conquer the great city of Constantinople. Within a few days of arrival, Mehmed positioned his army's cannons. He positioned them in 4 locations near the weaker areas of the city's walls. These were the Cresu Gate, Piggy Gate, the San Ramono Gate, and the Palace of the Most Serene Emperor. The largest cannons employed by the Turks flung cannonballs weighing approximately 1,200 pounds and were approximately 13 quartae in their circumference. There were also smaller cannons flinging cannonballs of different sizes, including 800 and 500 pounds. These cannons, in combination with each other, laid waste to the city's walls and are a significant factor in the victory of the Ottoman Empire over the Byzantine Empire. This information was retrieved from the primary source and account of Niccolo Barbaro at the time of the siege. In our second slide, we will be discussing continued context of the fall of Constantinople. Mehmed II's forces were not only comprised of land forces and cannons, but also a navy. In the Turkish fleet, there were 145 total ships, with an assortment of ship types such as galleys and fustae. The galleys held cannons and were also utilized for bombardment of the city's walls. Following the destruction of its walls, the fall of the city soon followed. In the midst of the fighting, the Emperor of Constantinople, Constantine XI, was reported to die in the fighting. The Turks ran over the city, pillaging, robbing, raping, and killing. The hardships of the siege were said to be a factor in the wrath of the Turks, although previous failures of the Turks to take Constantinople were likely to also be a factor. This wrath was unleashed upon the citizens of Constantinople, resulting in mass slaughter in which many were killed. One of these citizens was actually the uncle of Mehmed II, who had fled to the city of Constantinople out of fear that Mehmed II would try to kill him as he had tried to kill him previously. Mehmed II's uncle was being protected by Emperor Constantine, but when the city fell, he tried to flee via the escape boats. In his attempt to flee, he was caught by Mehmed II's troops and beheaded. With such bloodshed, the city of Constantinople became a frightening sight to behold. It was reported when Mehmed II entered the city, he was greatly saddened by the unnecessary actions of his troops and felt much grief over the slaughter and destruction of such a great city. This information was derived from the primary source, the detailed account of Critolus. In our next slide, we'll be discussing the primary sources. My 2 primary sources are both detailed accounts from both sides of the siege of Constantinople. The first detailed account was written by Hermodorus Michael Critolus, who was a civil servant in service to Mehmed II. He previously served Mehmed by working as the governor of the island of Imbros between 1456 and 1466. This island was also where the author was from. He not only wrote on the fall of Constantinople, but also wrote much about the history of the Ottoman Empire. Specifically, he wrote on the major historical events between the years of 1451 and 1467 pertaining to the Ottoman Empire. As a civil servant in service of Mehmed II, Kritovolos had a strong bias that was positively favored towards the Ottoman Empire. His account of the siege of Constantinople focused greatly on the military matters of the siege. The second detailed account and primary source came from the diary of Niccolo Barbaro. Niccolo Barbaro was a surgeon in the city of Constantinople and belonged to a patrician Venetian family. He wrote in his diary on a daily basis, recording what happened before, during, and after the siege of Constantinople from the eyes of a Byzantine citizen whose bias was strongly anti-Ottoman, as he was greatly upset about the attempted conquering of his city. Barbaro's accounts were incredibly detailed and are a great source to reference, as they include detailed accounts of not just land battles, but also the naval side to the siege of Constantinople. In our next slide, we'll be discussing secondary sources. My first secondary source is a book written by Walter Hanek, directly addressing the siege and fall of Constantinople, and more specifically, why it was so significant and how did it impact history. It was peer-reviewed by Professor Michael Angold from the University of Edinburgh. My second secondary source is a book I retrieved from a JSTOR database. It was written by Jonathan Harris and reviewed by Dorothy D.F. Abrahams. The book was published by the Cambridge University Press. With one secondary source coming from a prestigious university and both of them being peer-reviewed, they have increased validity. In our next slide, we'll be discussing historical significance. The historical significance of the fall of Constantinople is massive. Historians consider the fall of Constantinople by the hands of Mehmed II to be the event that turned history around for the Byzantine Empire, and not for the better. As a result of the loss of their crown jewel of a city, the Byzantine Empire disintegrated and became swamped with feudal fiefdom that replaced centralized power. The fight for Constantinople was seen as a heroic battle and attempted defense of Christendom against the feared spread of Islam. However, when Constantine XI lost to Mehmed II, it became a severe blow to Christianity. This information was derived from my secondary source, written by Harris Jonathan. In our next slide, we'll be discussing the continued information relating to the historical significance of the fall of Constantinople. The historical significance of the fall of Constantinople does not stop there either. It can be extended to being the marking point in which the Middle Ages came to an end and the Renaissance began. The fall of Constantinople encouraged a subsequent and greatly influential Renaissance that has its roots spreading out all the way into our modern day through philosophy, art, science, politics, and more. The specific way in which the fall of Constantinople encouraged the Renaissance was through the fleeing of scholars from the city of Constantinople to the west, where they brought their ideas and had those ideas flourish in a more accepting age and area of Europe. However, the fall of Constantinople's historical significance is not all positive. In fact, with the sack of the city, European trade routes and relationships with Asia were all but severed. These relationships and trade routes would take many years to get going as they once were. Constantinople, once taken by the Turks, was renamed Istanbul and became a centerpiece of the Ottoman Empire and is to this day a major city in Turkey with great significance to the modern world. This information was derived from the secondary source written by Walter Hannock. And for my next and last slide, I have my bibliography, which shows and cites all my sources. Two of my sources are primary sources, are peer-reviewed, and the other two sources are peer-reviewed secondary sources. Thank you everyone for listening, and have a great day.